Hey y'all, I'm JC May. I'm the Corteva pasture specialist for Alabama, Mississippi, and the Panhandle of Florida. I live in Montgomery, Alabama, but before I came to Alabama, I'm actually a native to Oklahoma. I was born and raised in central Oklahoma on a seed stock cow-calf operation that my family still manages today, and actually I'm a fourth generation Angus cattle producer. So I really enjoy partnering together with y'all on your operations and growing the best forage that we can. Tonight, thank you for having me virtually. I'm going to be talking about weed control in your pastures and hayfields and some solutions that we have here at Corteva to help give you the most out of your grass. Okay, so some of y'all maybe have not heard of Corteva before, or maybe wondering, what is Corteva? So a few years ago, Dow AgriSciences and DuPont's ag business actually joined together to create Corteva. And now Corteva is the only pure play agricultural company out of the US. So to me, that's really important, being a rancher's daughter and working with y'all. All your money spent with us is going back into the US economy. So I'm really, I feel fortunate to work for a company that supports US farmers and ranchers. So when we talk about weed control, it's really more than just spray this, do that. We really have to take a few things into consideration before we make those decisions. So I set this up kind of like a book, and we need to go through each chapter before we come up with a solution, or things to consider before we come up with a solution for what we're trying to control. The first thing we'll cover is, why do I even need to consider weed control in my operation? The next thing is properly identifying the weeds that you have. We'll briefly go over calibrating your sprayer, different methods of putting out weed control. Timing, then we'll talk about timing versus rate. If I had $1 for every time I got asked, JC, when's the best time for me to spray, I would be a millionaire. This is a big thing, the timing and rate of your applications. I'll barely touch on Mother Nature because that's one thing that it's out of our hands. The good Lord controls that. And then I'll give y'all a product update at the end. And I'm a visual person. I hope some of y'all are too in the crowd. I added this picture because I think it speaks volumes on what we're trying to do on our operations. Before we're cattle producers, we're actually grass producers. So stronger grass equals beefier cattle. And so I think that tells a lot. So why weed control? So whenever you step out into your pasture or hayfield, it's a constant balancing act between your weeds and your forage quality. They're all competing for the same sunlight, nutrients, and moisture. But the number one reason why weed control is important is because it improves your forage quantity and quality. And overall, that improves your stocking rates, your carrying capacities, and really just preserves your land for future generations. We all know that land is not getting any cheaper, and it's actually becoming very hard to come across. But it's really simple. If you think about it this way, less weeds equals more grass, and more grass equals more beef. So, like my family and like a lot of y'all, think about it this way. If you have good grass seed, you're ultimately going to have, more milk in your mamas. You're going to wean heavier calves. And at the end of the day, no matter how you market your cattle, that's going to equal more dollars in your pocketbook. So that's how I try to think about it and explain it, that you're actually coming into an economical resource to help you put more dollars in your pocket. So I've worked this territory for about 6 years, and I've been blessed to stand in some beautiful, well-managed hayfields and pastures, and across the Southeast, really. And the best ones that I see are folks who are incorporating not only weed control, but also fertilizer. So I don't like to share a lot of numbers especially at meetings like this because y'all may be sitting far in the back and this is on a projector screen and it's hard to see the data. But I did want to make note of this because this was actually some research that was conducted in Mississippi. So the first table here talks, basically you're comparing doing nothing at all to using just fertilizer, to using just a herbicide, and to finally using herbicide with fertilizer. And I want you to direct your attention to the red 74 number where it says fertilizer only. And that means that 74 pounds of grass that was over the check. So then you go down a column, and that's just with using a herbicide. And you can see just by killing your weeds, you're getting 1,000 pounds of grass that are over the check. But then finally, if you go down to the final column, that's herbicide with fertilizer. You're really maximizing your forage by getting 2,000 pounds of grass over check. And then the table below is just the same research that was conducted in Texas. So you can see the grass pounds were just magnified. But I think this is a good thing to look at whenever you're taking this into consideration. If you go and pencil it out, this makes good business sense. Now here's a photo for some of y'all that are maybe more visual folks. On my side, my left, you see the herbicide treatment, and you have a bag full of grass and a dead weed. And then on the other side, in contrast, you know, that's using no herbicide, not doing anything. And the big thing is that, you know, you're really decreasing your tonnage per acre of grass. You see that bag of grass is not very full, and then you have a big weeds taking up space where there could be grass and cattle could be grazing. And then you see that's 152% increase in your forage by applying a herbicide. So what about mowing? You know, a lot of folks, I think, enjoy sitting on a bush hog in the summer. Maybe it's therapeutic to them. And I will say there is a place for a bush hog on your operation, especially if you're clipping Dallas grass seed heads, if you're in the prairie and things like that. But to use it for weed control, I would say that is probably not the best idea. And I think this picture speaks 1,000 words. So this is a producer that has used bush hogging as a form of weed control for years. And you can tell that the Cherokee roses are taking over this pasture, and his grass stand is not that great. So ultimately what's going to happen is if he continues to do this, he's not really killing those weeds. He's just making them really mad, and they're coming back with a vengeance. And then you can see what he's doing to his forage quality and quantity. And, you know, y'all may do some research on your own, but there is, if you really think about the cost of mowing, it can range anywhere from $15 to $30 an acre, which is sometimes double a herbicide application cost. So just keep that in mind. I know some of y'all may have the equipment in your shop and have a hired hand or someone, maybe even yourself, to do the labor, and may think in your head, well, this isn't costing me a lot, but in the long run it can, especially with the diesel prices climbing. So really, spend less to make more. And I think that this chart speaks a lot of volumes, especially when, you know, maybe we don't really see what's going on. I mean, we look at our pastures, maybe you look at yours every day, maybe you don't get to check your whole place all the time, but you think, yeah, everything looks good, you know, whatever, things are going great. But I think this chart, this graph speaks volumes when you compare doing a herbicide treatment, doing nothing, and mowing. So you see we're comparing pounds per acre versus early herbicide mowing and doing nothing at all. And what really stood out to me is that doing nothing at all, you're actually getting more pounds of grass per acre doing nothing versus mowing. So if you think about the time it may take you to bush hog your pastures, maybe a couple days or more in the summer, I mean, what's the point if you're not getting any more pounds of grass per acre if you just did nothing? Where when you use an early herbicide application, you're getting, you know, 1,300 pounds of grass versus 300 pounds of grass. You're actually maximizing your investment there. And you can see that's a 390% gain. So I think, you know, if you really break it down and compare the two or even the three, it makes the most economical sense to use a herbicide early. So the next thing that is really important is identifying the weed and making sure that, you know, wherever you go for help and recommendations, that they know what type of species you have. But before I get into that, I want y'all to look at this pasture decline chart. So think of the place maybe you're planning to spray or want to spray this year. This chart basically shows you where we want to be and where sometimes we're at. So you see in the green square, that's where we all want to be. That's well-managed pastures. We have minor weed competition and uniform grazing. But in reality, a lot of us are coming into the lime green to the orange squares. And really that's just, you know, we're having different weeds encroach and come in. And really, if you don't do anything for a period of time, you're gonna get to the darker end of this chart. So keep that in mind as well. If you're more into the orange and brown squares, it may take you a couple years to get to where you're in the green square. So just keep that in mind. And then of course we added the cattle down at the bottom to show you're really maximizing your stocking rates and grazing capacities when you have well-managed pastures. When we get into the latter end of this chart, you can see, I mean, you're having to sell some calves, or, you know, what's the point whenever you're having heavy infestation or a lot of weed infestation come into your place. So basically, a weed is, you know, it's robbing the forage of its moisture, sunlight, and nutrients. But a lot of these species take up space. And y'all know what I'm talking about. Dewberry vines, blackberry briars, Cherokee roses, and there are also weeds that are poisonous and toxic to livestock. These are just main ones that y'all probably see all the time: pearl mint, buttercup, and Jimson weed. But it's really simple when we think about the types of weeds and what we're trying to kill. There's really only 3 types of weeds that we're trying to kill in our pastures and hayfields, and those are annuals, biennials, and perennials. So an annual species is actually generally pretty easy to kill, and that's because that they complete their life cycle within 1 year, and they generally reproduce from a seed. So the key is with annuals, if you can spray them or control them before they go to seed with a residual herbicide, you generally won't have to worry about these for the next year. Now, there's all different types of annuals, especially that are out right now. But one example that a lot of y'all probably struggle with during the summer is spiny amaranth, which is just a fancy word for pigweed. So for those of you that don't know, mature pigweed species actually has about 600,000 seed heads on it. And you can see in the picture below that the close-up of that seed head. So if you don't do anything to these, or maybe you mow them, they're just building up in your seed bank or your soil profile. And this is why they are hard to manage throughout the summer, because they build up so much in your soil profile and seed bank. You can't control all of them from germinating throughout the summer. And you can see they love to grow in high traffic areas. This is a picture, sorry, it's kind of slanted. This is a picture in a lot, a backgrounding lot, by your hay rings. Wherever you feed hay, you're probably gonna find pigweed. Biennials. So these species live through 2 growing seasons. The first year they have vegetative growth. So when a biennial is in vegetative growth, that is the best time to control them. And then the second year, they're both vegetative and reproductive. But the good news about biennials is that they also reproduce from a seed. So the thought process here is, again, like an annual. If I can control this before it goes to seed with a residual herbicide, hopefully, you know, I probably will not have this, or I'll start to get rid of those permanently on my operation. Biennials love to grow in lower disturbance areas, where annuals are in more higher disturbance areas, but most biennials are most thistles are biennials, excuse me. So this is the stage, the rosette stage of when you want to kill a thistle. And if you use a residual herbicide, you will most likely and more than likely eradicate them from your place. And some of y'all may have seen this from example. Now, this picture, I laugh a little bit because I usually advise folks, hey, don't spray your thistles when they're as tall as me. And I'm about 5 foot tall, and this is a picture of me and some thistles that are about 5 foot tall. And you can see they're flowering and blooming out. And we did actually get a pretty good control on these, but you're gonna deal with these for the next year because they went to seed. So just keep that in mind. And of course, I'll go back to this, you will have to use higher rates or even a mix of products to get a good control on this. Now, perennials, these are the harder ones to kill, and that's because they live for more than 2 years, and their reproduction doesn't just come from their seed. It also comes from vegetation or vegetatively. So that makes them very hard to manage and kill. Woody plants, brush species, and trees are mostly perennials, and especially if they're out of place. But a common perennial that we deal with is horse nettle. And this starts to come out when the soil temperatures get warmer. So this is a summer perennial species. And the best time to kill a horse nettle is when it is blooming. So when you see that white flower, that is when you need to spray. So I like to show this picture not only because it is from a Mississippi publication, and it, you know, this is reality, but it's a good view, aerial view of what can happen when you use a herbicide to clean up a pasture, and a view that a lot of us don't get to see. So on the control side, you can see that this pasture was being infested by dog fennel and horse nettle. And then on the herbicide application side, they used Graze On Next at 24 ounces per acre, and they were able to save this Bermuda grass pasture that was losing 60% of its grazing potential because of those species. And I think that the aerial view, that's, like I said, a bird's eye view that we don't get to see a lot after we do spray, they got really good control of this. So, and you can see that there's a lot more room for grazing, better grass for them, which is very vital for us in the summer months. So I show this slide just to make sure that you know exactly what species you are trying to kill. In different places across the Southeast, we all have a different name for certain weeds. I mean, if I'm in Poplarville, Mississippi, or Crossville, Alabama, we're gonna have a different name for the yellow weed or the buttercup that's out right now. So this is just to kind of help you see that, you know, we may be talking about sumpweed or ragweed in the prairie, but that's actually marsh elder. Or a lot of us love to call the Chinese tallow tree popcorn tree. So it's just good to know that when you're communicating what species you have to get a recommendation on what to do, it's good to know the actual name. So I'm going to briefly just touch on a few main points on this, just that it's really important. Normally, if I was with y'all in person, I'd have y'all show your hands on who's spraying their own pastures, who's maybe having a custom applicator come out. But I just wanted to make sure we went over this before we move forward. So this may be some of y'all in your pastures in the summer. You may use a boom sprayer like the man in the top corner, or you may have a boomless sprayer like the man in the bottom corner. And we do actually have cheat sheets to help calibrate your sprayers depending on what type you have, so you're not you know, over spraying or under spraying to get the most bang for your buck and actually get the best kill. But here's just a general checklist that I know we get in a hurry sometimes when it's that time of year, this time of year, to start spraying, and we maybe, we're at mercy of the weather and time and all these things coming at us. But here's a quick checklist just to make sure that, everything's good to start going. So the first one is so simple, but a lot of times people forget, oh yeah, the last time I used this, I was spraying fence rows with maybe a non-selective herbicide like Roundup. And you're going to spray your pastures, and you need a selective herbicide that keeps your grass. So that's something to make sure that you are, if you need to triple rinse your tank, make sure you're cleaning out your lines and your screens. If you have a boom sprayer, all that stuff is really important before you get rolling. Make sure you're using the right gauges and nozzles. Some of y'all maybe even have GPS. If you don't have GPS, I think there's a few apps you can download on your phone to make that accessible to you. So making sure you have, the right spray pattern down. Environmental conditions. This seems really also kind of common to think about, but, making sure it's not too wet, but also too dry. Making sure if you're around sensitive crops that the wind or the weather is in your favor so you don't have any drift. Keeping all those things in mind is really important. Your tractor versus calibration, or maybe you're using a side-by-side or a buggy, making sure that, your ground speed and everything is right, and making sure it's calibrated correctly. And then in your area, if you do have a custom applicator and you don't have time to spray, it may be good to involve them. So one thing I wanted to show y'all was Graze on Next and a product we have called DuraCore have a label to be treated on dry fertilizer. So what this allows y'all to do is to basically kill two birds with one stone. So you're putting out fertilizer and weed control at the same time to really get a jump start on your grass early to carry you through the summer. This is great because it fits all different sizes of operations, and it's very weather forgiving. If it's about to rain, you can put this out when it's raining because it's soil activated. The herbicide is on the prill. You don't need to have spray equipment. So if you don't have equipment, this is a good option for you. If you have reduced risk of drift because it's on a prill, and then you can apply it, on your schedule when you have time. And the calibration is off your hands. It's actually done at the location that is offering this. Now, I will say, if you haven't heard of this before, or it may be new in your area, that is because a lot of locations are also crop locations. And Corteva requires the locations that are offering this to make sure that their equipment is dedicated to pasture use. And so, that may not be available in your area, but just contact me or the person you reach out to about your weed control questions to see if it is. But I'd be glad to help you find who is offering this in your area. Here's some proven results from South Mississippi, actually. On my left is a ryegrass field, and you can see where this was applied to the fence row. On the other side, it was not applied. And this was probably a month after application. And then on the other side is Bermuda grass pasture, and also about a month after treatment. And you can see that there's no weeds in sight, clean, beautiful, lush grass that'll carry you through the summer, should. So it works, and it's a great, like I said, it saves you time and money being able to do this. So now we're going to talk about timing versus rate. There isn't a perfect time for everything, but there is when we're considering spraying and putting out weed control. So before I get into the different times to spray, this is just a general pasture management recommendation calendar, and it needs to be updated. As you can see, it still has the Dow AgriSciences logos and some of the herbicide recommendations need to be changed, but overall, it basically shows you what you should be doing to your pastures in a year. So you have, April through, and I would say down here, really March through May is our early season broadleaf weed control, which would be a pint and a half of Graze on Next. And now that we have Duracore, 12 to 16 ounces of Duracore. And then you can see, onto the summer, what you should be doing. And this is very general, but I think it's a good thing to think about depending on what time of year it is. But really, when we think about weeds and when to spray, we're really controlling broadleaf weeds and brush. For broadleaf weeds, we have the early season, mid-season, and late season, or the fall. And then for brush, we have different scenarios. So we have renovations, spot treatments, fence rows, and ditch mix. So the first timing is our early season, and that's really January through April. And I know it sounds really foreign to spray in January or February, but really a lot of these weeds that are out there now have started germinating since November. This is a really good time to spray because it's early growing conditions. A lot of these weeds are still in their vegetative state, and they're not super big yet, so they're easier to control. Here's some of the weeds that we have out there now. So you can see buttercup's a big one, dead nettle, henbit, thistles is another one. But a lot of us spray mid to late season. So really, I consider that May, June, July. Maybe even like I have people spraying until September, but this is probably the most popular timing to spray. And this is a decent time to spray because you're getting some of your winter annuals and also your summer perennials. It really just depends on what your key species are to control. But during this time, because you are dealing with the end of winter annual and biennials and the beginning of summer perennials, you may have to use a tank mix of products or higher use rate or things like that to get the best control. Also, coverage is key. I always recommend to use at least 15 to 20 gallons of water per acre, especially during this time. So here's some of the weeds that we see during the summer. And I know these all look familiar to y'all, I'm sure, but on the bottom, my left corner, dog fennel, or summer cedar, cypress weed, cedar weed, has a bunch of nicknames. The top boxes are pigweed, and then the bottom, my right, is horse nettle. So just keep in mind that these can, the later in the summer, the harder they are to control. So just keep that in mind. And here's some pictures I have of, just in the field. And in the top photo, that's marsh elder, and that's generally a prairie species. So it's very region specific. And I would say even dog fennel in the bottom picture is very region specific as well. Not everyone deals with these weeds. So the next few slides are actually comparing a non-residual herbicide to a residual herbicide. So I know when we go to make decisions, we're looking at a lot of things. Obviously, the topics I've covered so far in this presentation, but also things like price per acre and things like that. And I know that may be a reason why some of us may want to use a non-residual herbicide. So I just want to show the impact it has on your forages by using both of these. And I apologize for the congestion of the text down at the bottom of the page. The formatting is just a little off. But this picture, as you can see, is the control. So it's just showing you kind of what wasn't treated, what we're dealing with here in these few slides. So you can see it's a lot of pigweed, dog fennel, and other summer weeds. So this is 2 pints per acre of Weed Master. And it says this is 65 days after treatment. And obviously the application was made in the box. And you can see that you're getting a lot of regrowth here in this plot. And that's common when you're using a product that doesn't have a residual. You're going to kill what's there, but in a few months, you're going to have stuff come back in. So in contrast, this is using a residual herbicide, and this is 1.5 pints of Graze on Next per acre. And this is 95 days after treatment. And you can see exactly where this was applied and what we're keeping out. And this is all in relation to what's going on with the weather, what type of summer grass you have, and what's coming up instead of those weeds. But this is just showing you that it may be a little more per acre to put out a residual herbicide, but generally it's going to give you better grass growth through the summer. And just really keep in mind that not every situation is the same. Even what you did on your place last year may need to be tweaked for this year. Maybe what your neighbor is doing shouldn't be what you're doing. So just keep that in mind. Mother Nature. Now this is one I'm just going to run through, make a couple points, because like I said earlier, this is something that is out of our control. And this is what the good Lord blesses us with. So I just wanted to show these contrast pictures of weather that we can have here in the Southeast. So the picture by itself is when we were in the drought. It's 2015-16 year. It was just a terrible drought that we had, a very historical drought. So we can get like that in the summer. And then the 2 pictures are showing a snowstorm in the south here compared to a perfect summer day. So we get it all here now. We're in tornado season, so just keep that in mind whenever you're planning your herbicide applications. But the biggest thing I want to hone in with Mother Nature is just beware of stress. A lot of these products, like Graze on Next, are growth regulators. They're auxin herbicides, which means they grow the weeds to death. So you want them to be in an active vegetative state where they're going to grow to death. And you want your grass to be thriving as well, to take up space once that weed dies. So that's the biggest thing. And that stress can come from a drought, from too much rain, really any condition that's preventing active growth that may limit the herbicide effectiveness. You really have to manage your expectations. Another thing that impacts our pastures and hayfields to being the best they can be are not just weeds. We also deal with different diseases. Bipolaris, which is very common in Bermuda grass hayfields. It's when you start to notice the tip of the grass leaf turning purple or brown. That's typically an indication of a potassium deficiency. So, really take your soil samples, figure out, what needs to go back on that hayfield or even a pasture, and, if you're not doing that. Another thing is pests. So armyworms are big, and when we get them, they normally prefer Bermuda grass, but I've seen them in Bahia, crabgrass. If they're really strong, they are not picky. And the best thing to do to scout for armyworms is to really just pull back the canopy to be able to see the ground in your pasture hayfield, and really spraying for these is really effective. And you want to try to get the armyworm when it's about as big as the end of your thumb, or excuse me, your pinky. When they're as big as your thumb, that means it may be too late. So just know they can move fast, and insecticides work really well. Stem maggots are a little harder to control because they actually live as a maggot in the grass blade. So it's hard to get exposure to them. but that is another one to be aware of. And if you need help, scouting for these or have more questions, please reach out. So finally, we've gone through the different chapters of things to consider and think about before we start to manage our pastures and hayfields. And I wanted to provide you with some solutions that we have at Corteva to help really maximize your results. So the 3 products I'm going to talk about today are some you may have heard of or maybe have even used before, and I appreciate that if you have. So Duracore, Graze on Next, and Pasture Guard. These are the 3 products I'm going to highlight today. And you'll see that the logos look a little different in this, and that is because we took, a total branding change with Corteva. And so all of our product names and labels when you get the product will all look similar and have this green check. So I just wanted to show you that and make you aware. If you remember before, they were kind of all different colors, like Graze on Next was gold, Remedy Ultra was blue. So just know that they have all kind of changed to this green check. So before I get into the details of each of these products, I really just wanted to show this picture. On the left, my left of the picture, you can see, the cattle are being crowded out by the weeds that are taking up space. They're not able to really get a good uniform grazing consistency out there. Where on the other hand, you can see on my right of the picture what that pasture can look like. And you're getting more cows out there to graze, your stocking rates are increased, you have more uniform grazing, you're preserving that land. So really think of it as your return on investment. It's not just making your place maybe visually look more appealing, you're actually putting more dollars in your pocket with your operation, choosing the proper herbicide and implementing weed control into your operation. So let's talk about Duracore. The biggest things about Duracore, are its flexibility and really ease of use. So the product has a lower use rate. You can run 12 to 16 ounces per acre and kill 150 plus weeds. So you're getting a broader spectrum of weeds with a lower use rate compared to like a Graze on Next or a Graze on P+D. It comes in a gallon jug instead of a 2-gallon jug like Graze on Next or a 2.5-gallon jug like Graze on P+D. So that becomes, really easier to handle in the field or wherever you're mixing the product. Like I said before, it has the dry fertilizer compatibility, but also mixes into 32% or 28% in-soil a lot better than Graze on does, Graze on Next and P+D. And then it has really good tank mix flexibility with if you're tank mixing it with Remedy or Pasture Guard, but it also can tank mix with other products as well. And then it's very safe. This is another key feature of Duracore. It basically doesn't even have an odor. It's very low odor. It's non-volatile, which means it's not going to get up and move down the road. We still have to worry about risk of drift, but it's not going to get up and move in a temperature inversion or something like that. You don't have to have a license to put out this product. It's non-restricted, safe on grass, and then there's no grazing restrictions. You can put this product out as your cattle are grazing. And then I said earlier, it controls 150 weeds, give or take. It says 140 plus, but some new weeds we're picking up that Graze on Next doesn't get or maybe isn't as good on. The big one would be plantain, tall ironweed, western ironweed, poison hemlock, marsh elder. Those are just a few that Duracore is a lot better on than Graze on Next. It also has really good activity on different brush species, especially things like locust, multiflora rose, and even some blackberry. So here's a picture I just wanted to show y'all from last year. This was put out in late May, I believe, and you can see kind of the line in the pasture of where they treated versus where they didn't. So on my left is where they treated, and you can see they've got green grass and no weeds. And this was, I think, a month after the treatment was made. And then on my right, you can see kind of what they were dealing with. And it may be hard for y'all to tell, but it's thistles, small dog fennel, and smartweed. And there is some horse nettle out there. So very common summer weeds, but we really cleaned up this place with a relatively low use rate in this pasture. And then, of course, Graze on Next. If y'all aren't familiar with Graze on Next, it's also, giving you superior broad spectrum residual weed control, and it's non-restricted. There's no grazing restrictions, and it doesn't harm your grasses. The use rate for Graze on Next is going to be 24 ounces per acre. You're, like I said, broad spectrum, you're killing about 100 different weeds, and then it's a really good tank mix partner as well, like DuraCore, with your Remedy or Pasture Guard. So I just told y'all about DuraCore and Graze on Next. Those products have soil residual. So that means that they're going to kill the weeds that are there, but also prevent others from coming up later in the season. On the other hand, Pasture Guard does not have a residual, and it's really targeting brush species. So your tallow trees, privet hedge, briars, those types of species. If y'all have ever used Remedy Ultra, which thank you if you have, this is like super Remedy. I always explain to folks it's like souped up Remedy because it has Remedy in it plus another active. So it's really effective on brush species, and it doesn't harm your grass. It's non-restricted, and it really improves your grass production. So it's really good on, fence rows, if you're doing spot treatments, or even if you have a mix of briars and broadleaf weeds and woody stuff in your pasture. This is a great tank mix with Graze on Next or DuraCore to really just get everything at one time. And that's what I'm leading into now. So if you tank mix Pasture Guard, really 8 to 12 ounces with Graze on Next or DuraCore, you're going to control a lot of hard to kill weeds. Dog fennel up to 4 feet, that's a big deal. Anything in the nightshade family, so thistles, horse nettle, your ragweeds, your goat weeds, pig weeds, tropical soda apple, briars. Really, if you have you maybe let a place get kind of late in the season, or it's just you haven't sprayed it in a while, this is a great economical way to clean that up pretty quick, and then it's safe on your grass. Here's some pictures of this tank mix in action, and you can see it's really good on dog fennel, especially if you have really mature dog fennel, or if you just it's late summer and you've let a place get out of hand. This is really the best tank mix, the best treatment for that. And if you do have a situation where your dog fennel looks like this in the bottom picture of this knockout dog fennel blue and white picture here, it looks like the bottom, you're gonna need the tank mix. You're not going to kill that with just Graze on Next or DuraCore or a 2,4-D alone. You're gonna need to use this tank mix. And you can see the after on the top photo here. And then in the two photos next to that one, in the top, this was a pasture that was neglected by a previous landowner, and the new landowner wanted to clean it up, and they had dog fennel, ironweed, horse nettle, briars, really just a whole slew of things. And it was later in the summer, so everything was very mature. And they used 1.5 pints of Graze on Next, and I think 10 ounces of Pasture Guard. And then you can see the after in the bottom photo there. It's about a month after, or actually, yeah, a few weeks after. And you can see that all those weeds, you see skeletons in that pasture, and which made room for more grass. So this is really exciting and something new that I wanted to share with y'all. It's not registered yet, but we are expecting registration this spring of a product that will kill your weeds while maintaining your white clover. It is going to be called Pro Clova, and this picture actually was a trial that was put out last year. And you can see kind of in the middle of where the application was sprayed, and on the outside, the weeds that are growing up. And this is 2 months after treatment. 24 ounces per acre Pro Clova plus an MSO surfactant. And you can see like the weeds that we're keeping out, which are mostly pigweed, horse nettle, things like that, and then the grass and the clover response. So I'm very excited to be able to offer a new product like this to y'all in the future, and a new solution that hopefully y'all will find beneficial. And also, please don't forget about Remedy Ultra, still premier, top of the line, and brush control. Also a good tape mix partner with Graze on Next and Duracore. Graze on P plus D. We're still making Graze on P plus D. Still a good, trusty product that we have. And then Surmount, if you have, a lot of brush and problematic weeds, that's also a good one to use as well. So I just wanted to say thank you for those who are supportive of Corteva and our products, and those who are, maybe haven't tried our products yet, but are going to. I really appreciate y'all and your time. So with that, I wish I was there to serve questions there with y'all, but if you do have questions, here's my contact information on the screen. Please send me an email or call or text me. I'll do my best to reach out, but like I said, thank y'all again. I hope you'll have a good season and a good rest of your evening. Thank you.